So because I love sci-fi, I've prepared a talk that involves an alien travelling through other worlds and a grim dystopian future. But it's also about what pornography is doing to the relationship between the sexes. So today, I think we live balanced between two worlds, the material and the coded. And in our hands, in each of our pockets, we have a portal between these worlds. And we can travel into an existence where relationships and even the self are disembodied, where they're rendered as data. And I don't think we have yet, and I suspect we possibly never will, really understand the full impact of how our analogue animal selves have been changed by this technology. Now, I think by its nature, and you may well disagree, but I think by its nature there is something profoundly egotistical, egocentric, and therefore quite masculine about the online world, because I think the experiences we see online are bent around us by algorithms. And I think that's hardly surprising in a way, because the architects of the online world were pretty much all libertarian men from Silicon Valley, so they had a beautiful utopian dream. So the Electronic Frontier Foundation's John Perry Barlow called it a new home of the mind that all may enter without privilege, prejudice supported by race, economic power, military force, or station of birth. I mean, I think, beautiful though that sounds, it shows the sort of naivety of your average 17-year-old communist. It's pretty stupid. Because our bodies are not just encumbrances to escape, they anchor us into material reality. And I think when that goes, when accountability to our neighbours, to our families, to our communities, to our friends, when those things go, we lose the connections that civilise us. And we now have people who hide behind their screens, and the online world becomes a dumping ground for the darkest impulses that we all share to some degree. And I think that the norms and values that thrive in that environment are often as toxic and misogynist as they are lucrative. And anonymity allows men and boys who would never cross the threshold of a brothel or a sex shop to become sex industry consumers. And I think that the timing is significant. So at the very moment in the West, women were beginning to get rights, and our rights were in the ascendant, this parallel realm emerges where we can be put back in the bedroom on our backs. I think to see the impact of this, quite an interesting thought experiment is, imagine an alien, and you give them, the internet as a data set, and you say, what do you know? What's a woman for, based on what you've seen? And the answer would inevitably be to be fucked by a man. And that's the overarching script for the entire online world. And I don't think it stays quarantined in pornography. It bleeds into everything. So I think from beauty rituals to dating norms to how we spend, how we speak, and even how we vote. And as Rob and I were to give a sort of practical example, if you like, as Rob and I were writing this book, XAI, and that's the company behind X, i.e. Twitter's so-called digital companions, was paying digital engineers $440,000 per year specifically to create AI companions, and they include Annie and Valentine, who you may have come across. I just want to use these two sort of archetypes, these two fictional characters, as a jumping off point about how pornography entrenches stereotypes. So, as anyone with experience of teenagers knows, your average 17-year-old girl is a door-slamming, selfish pain in the ass. Flirtatious Annie, not so. So she's coy, she's wide-eyed, she's agreeable, she giggles, she blushes, she exists only to please, and she can be trained into submission, even into stripping, if you say the right things. And I think she is a narcotic for lonely teenage boys. Meanwhile, Valentine is a little older. Visually, I think he shares a lot in common with his anime sister, only he's afforded the dignity of having clothing that fully covers him. His behaviour is constructed from erotic fiction aimed at women, so he's scripted to be withholding and dominant even when he's responding to commands. And I think invariably some straight girls, and perhaps some gay boys, will convince themselves that they found the perfect partner who understands them, though I suspect there'll be far more devotees of Annie than there will of Valentine. Now, the reason I think Annie and Valentine matter is that these are the poles around which the sexes now spin. And they're sort of cartoonish extremes that have displaced the feminist hope of earlier decades that stereotypes would wither away. And with regard to the choice of animated AI companions, it's worth bearing in mind that hentai, that's Japanese pornographic cartoons, has topped Pornhub searches for the past few years. So it's really no surprise that they've chosen this particular presentation. And obviously they are coded fantasies, but let's just imagine they were real. What would their childhoods under the pornocracy look like? What risks would they be exposed to? Now, everything I'm about to sort of go into here is grounded in statistics and facts. So let's go back in time. Annie is 11, Valentine is 11. And at that age, there's around a 50% chance, if they're in the UK, that they will have seen pornography. Often not by choice, but by accident, and generally on social media sites, not porn sites. But should they seek out and go to a specialist porn site, for which in the UK they now either need a VPN now or access to an adult's email, Pornhub itself hosts titles related to franchises like Frozen. So Anna and Elsa BDSM or Anna Fucks Elsa Extended. Those are the sorts of titles they may well come across. And of course the site owners are well aware of this, and there are benefits to them of hooking users in young. Unlike all kids, at some point they're going to be curious about sex, and if they don't search porn out, it will find them. So today they'll be learning about sadism, about choking, about brutal anal sex, about gangbangs. They'll be learning that real men call women whore, bitch and slut, and that real women revel in that degradation. And these aren't the only dangers. So I think at a time when children are cosseted and protected from real-world risks, online, around 1 in 8 children across the world will have been contacted by an adult predator. Now for boys like Valentine, this is often through games, so games like Roblox. For girls, it's more likely to be social media sites. And some will be coaxed or coerced into recording indecent images of themselves. So the Internet Watch Foundation reports that 92% of the child abuse material that it removes is self-generated, and 99% of the victims are girls. Now, by the end of secondary school, 1 in 4 girls will have shared an indecent image of herself, and of those, a quarter were pressured into it, and nearly a third later regretted it. School itself may not help. Both Annie and Valentine won't be told not to watch porn. They may in fact be told that it's empowering for women because female performers often earn more than men, or that it can be enjoyed as a treat. They may even be introduced to BDSM and fetishes by a sex-positive personal, social and health educator. I don't know if anyone saw recently Eldor in Iceland. In Iceland, on the curriculum, they now have BDSM as a sexual orientation in its own right. So what happens next is unsurprising. Annie and Valentine may come to believe, as 42% of their peers do, that girls enjoy physically aggressive sex acts. Consequently, Annie may grow into one of the 35% of UK women aged 18 to 34 who has experienced choking during sex. She may also have been strangled, gagged or slapped by a male partner. Valentine could join the 57% of men under 40 who both admit that they have used violence against a woman during sex and who report that pornography influenced that behaviour. More disturbingly still, Annie's first experience of sexual violence may have been as a girl at the hands of a boy. So tellingly, there has been a year-on-year rise in child sex offences committed by other children. So for the first time last year, it was reported that the majority of those crimes were committed by other children. Now, by her late teens, Annie may slide from posing on TikTok for strangers' likes to opening an OnlyFans account. And in interviews for our book, the women who made pornography of themselves told me that some of them really hated what they were doing, but they became addicted to the attention. They also described obsessive body scrutiny, measuring themselves against filtered, preened competitors. Some underwent or were considering undergoing extreme cosmetic procedures, and that's to keep up with an online arms race. And those who left the industry spoke of lasting harms, anxiety, the inability to form lasting relationships, and shame. And once they had left, they faced the grim realisation that once content is online, it never truly disappears. So meanwhile, Valentine is likely to have shared porn with his friends on the school bus or in the playground. If he saw it before age 11, he is more likely to seek out extreme content. Some psychologists warn that early escalating exposure can increase the risk that boys will grow up into men who commit sexual violence. And just as Annie may find herself on the conveyor belt to porn or to the sex industry through sexualised social media posts, Valentine is likely to find solace in pornography in a world where the women don't laugh at him when he's in control. So I think from ISIS to trans activism, there are innumerable forces seeking to harness the power of disaffected young men. But let's say our Valentine is one of the millions who turns to the infamous Andrew Tate. Hyper-misogynistic and materialistic, Tate promises his millions of young male followers that to be an alpha male, they must conquer their emotions, that success can be achieved by accumulating possessions, whether that's cars or women. And that really taps into how boys, under the patriarchy, are taught to suppress their feelings, to exchange love and relationship for objects. And Tate's feelings are downstream of pornography. Tate's teachings, rather, are downstream of pornography. So they only really make sense if you already view females as subhuman, as products to be bought by men. So in a way, retreating into porn and its cousin, the manosphere, is an understandable reaction to adolescence, to the confusion of finding one's place in the world as a young man. And here's a truth that I think is too often ignored by feminists, and that's that in real life, girls do have a form of power. And I think it's often unwitting, but you can crush a boy's ego with a raised eyebrow or a laugh. And it's fair to say, when you first realise this as a teenage girl, it can be very frightening, but it can also be quite intoxicating. And obviously, some will be drawn to test this new power out by posting photos online. Meanwhile, in the classroom, well-intentioned but poorly well-intentioned but idiots basically, sex educators will teach boys to be ashamed of carrying the original sin, if you like, of being male. Now, if you contrast this to the pornified teachings of Tate, hateful though they may be, pornography and the manosphere offer a safe space for them, away from the fear and the rejection, and where resentment and raging hormones can be weaponised against women and girls. Now, historically, men in power sought to neutralise the threat from angry, disaffected young men by promising them wives over who they would have dominion. And that's what Carol Pateman recognised as a form of sexual contract. I think today our tech overlords offer something similar. Men are now able to bond over the abuse of women, whether that's wholly in online or in person, or with the infamous rape of Madame Pellico. And it's the same sort of social exchange, but rebooted for the digital era. So if Valentine stews in these values, he will become detached from women. And indeed himself, it will become considerably harder for Valentine to relate to women and girls, or to find a romantic partner as he grows up. So tellingly, both Valentine and Annie are far less likely than those of older generations to have had a relationship during their teenage years. So if we zoom out from their personal experiences, and we ask, what do Annie and Valentine believe? What do they want? For the first time, a majority of young women of Annie's age call themselves feminists. But this doesn't necessarily tally with what we all here would understand as feminism. What they follow is a sort of hollowed out form of feminism, where slogans about the patriarchy are printed on merchandise, but they've been emptied of any meaning. So I refer to this as zombie feminism. And zombie feminism holds that sex work is work, that trans women are women, and that every choice a woman makes must be celebrated. Whether that's students getting lip fillers or girl bosses setting up OnlyFans accounts, everything's very personalised. Meanwhile, Valentine thinks women have it easier than men. Like around a quarter of men of his age, he believes that a man who stays at home with his children is less of a man, a view held by just 11% of boomers. He is also likely to agree with the 60% of Generation Z men who say that women's equality discriminates against men. And crucially, Annie and Valentine have dangerously regressive ideas about sexual violence. Currently, only 54% of Gen Z believe that it can still be rape if she doesn't fight back. A measly 42% of Gen Z understand that marriage doesn't give a husband the right to rape his wife. Now that compares to 87% of those over 65. So, something has happened in the intervening years. And it's of course worth bearing in mind that rape within marriage has been illegal in the UK since 1991. So the different platforms and groups used by Annie and Valentine are leading them to have radically divergent opinions. So young women are still likely to identify themselves as on the identitarian left, whereas young men are increasingly adopting a hard right stance. And it seems, unlike with previous generations, youngsters are now less likely than ever before to date across these political divides. So arguably, this is informed by the spaces online, where they now sort of ingest these values, and neither of these stances has women's interests at heart. So I don't think it's any surprise, given what I've outlined, that the birth rate across the developed world is nosediving. To be honest, I'm pretty neutral about that, but nonetheless, heterosexual couples are watching more porn, and they're having less sex than ever before. And this is a trend that started in Japan and Korea, in countries that were ahead of the curve on internet connectivity. And increasingly too, Japan, which has famously lax laws on pornography, and Korea, which is the world leader in plastic surgery. I think it's really interesting that these things seem to tally onto pornography use. Now, efforts to tackle the problem at its source of reduction in birth rates by sort of curbing pornography meet fierce resistance. So instead, our technological overlords offer engineering fixes. So men like Elon Musk, the father of these digital companions, Annie and Valentine, are steering us deeper into a pornocratic hellscape where children aren't protected from porn, but they're nudged towards solipsistic pseudo-relationships with artificial intelligence, where reproduction is outsourced to surrogates, and I think very soon, to womb bags. And this destination is really bleak, because it reduces women to sex objects and to mother objects. And men retreat into simulated intimacy, and the bedrock of social life, trust between the sexes, fractures. And if we don't reassert our human limits over these digital appetites, then we shouldn't be surprised when human relationships and love itself wither away.
Over half of preteens have watched porn. And when I say porn, I'm not talking about nudie ladies or pornographic playing cards. I'm talking about moving images, high-resolution videos depicting violence, sexual assault, and father-daughter abuse. And I'm not just taking this as like the worst stuff that I could find. I'm talking about edge cases. This is stuff that is offered to first-time users of porn. It is people's first introduction when they fire up Pornhub, or it's what they're seeing shared in Snapchat. It used to be at my school passing around faded, crumpled pictures torn out of porn mags where you could see a naked lady's bits. Now it's people passing around videos of bestiality, which a large proportion of children have seen. For over a decade now, and this is an illustration, the AVN Awards, which is the Oscars of the porn industry, for those who don't know, they've had a best incest category of its own. The last winner, I think I remember, was called My Sexy Little Sister 15. I don't know if she is 15 or if this is the 15th iteration of that particular scenario. So Joe and I, and others here who speak against porn, we get accused of being pearl-clutching, modern-day Mary Whitehouses, and their favourite phrase to throw at us is that ironic, "Oh, won't someone think of the children?" Well, I make no apologies for thinking of the children. I think of the children who are watching videos titled 25-minute facial destruction. I think about the children watching daughter gets stuck, daddy fucks her from behind. But the bigger issue isn't children. It is the adults that they will grow up to be. The BBC did a poll of young people, 16 to 21 years old, they found that over half of the men, or the men and boys, and more than a third of the girls and young women said that the main source of sex education was porn. That was 6 years ago. I can't imagine that that number has gone down. As an aside, and this isn't in my notes, I was staying with a friend last night, and something she said made me think about my own introduction to porn, which I thought was an initiation ceremony at my school where I was forced to look at a porn mag. And actually I remember it was buying a pack of pornographic playing cards when I was on holiday in Greece when I was about 12. And I'm sorry to use these words, but I didn't use this to masturbate to. I looked at it because I was curious, because nobody was telling me what sex was. I was quite scared by it, to be honest, but I looked at it and studied it because I wanted cues to know what to do when I was a grown-up soon. And that probably shaped me in some small way, but when you are watching the sorts of things that Joe has described in depth, and which I won't repeat here, how can it not possibly change you and shape you? Our first introduction to sex is incredibly powerful for setting our subsequent expectations and behaviours. They are the script that we use to navigate all subsequent sexual encounters. When that introduction is pornography, it normalises abuse, including child abuse. It teaches boys that it's pleasurable to abuse women, and it teaches women that they cannot say no. And it can't help but shape boys' attitudes towards women, which they will then take into adulthood. And just like everything that is digital, porn evolves, and it mutates at bewildering speed. Now, I don't want to do down our own book, but a lot of what we've written about, we started writing it in the winter of 2023. Things change so fast that a lot of the things that we talk about are out of date now. They're as out of date as the baby boom, the centerfolds. Even the stuff that I've mentioned, the content, it's already well on the way to becoming outdated. And in its place, we'll have a new form of porn. There's a new technological pornographic revolution that is happening right now. It's happening under our noses, and we don't know about it, just as the generation before us was not aware how profound the advent of tube sites was. Let me try and explain what this revolution is. It's not watching porn, and we all know that watching is a euphemism for wanking. This new form is being in porn, being in the scene through augmented reality or virtual reality. It's masturbating into lifelike porn robots or sex dolls. It's falling in love, as Joe has referred to, with AI girlfriends who never say no. And it's the sexualization of online spaces, gaming universes, and if metaverses take off, in them too. All of these things are happening now. It may sound shocking to us, I hope it does, because it so obviously is. It should be as shocking to us as the idea of sex between adults and children. But unfortunately, a generation is growing up where such a thing is not shocking at all. That should terrify us. We've all, I'm sure, played around with generative AI, even if it's just to create, funny photos, or just to see, if you can trick it, or to see how human it is. The ones that we know about, they have fairly strong safeguards. You can't, for example, take a living famous person and put them into sort of context there, because that would be that has huge potential for libel and other problems. But there are just as many tools out there that lack these safeguards, either through omission or by design. One of these apps is Cloth Off, which those who aren't familiar with it enables you to digitally strip anyone. I could take a photograph of anyone here, I could put it into the app, and for a small fee, it could take your clothes off. Only people who knew you incredibly well wouldn't know it wasn't you. There are also AI tools out there which, again, for a fee, will take somebody's face and turn it into high-resolution moving image porn just from someone's face. There are people in this audience who know that this isn't the future, this is the present. It's what happened to the founders of Collective Shout when they got a rape game banned from Steam. It might happen to me, but it's much more likely to happen to Jo, because, after all, she is a woman. And for me, this points to the darkest thing of all. Porn has always been about removing the link between sex and love, but it puts something else in its place. It forges a new link, which is between sex and punishment, between sex and abuse. That's how kids will be bullying their classmates in the near future. Again, it's how some kids are bullying their classmates now. Rather than just tease a girl, you can just turn her into a porn slut. You can make the picture in the morning, you can send it round the school at break, and by lunch, the whole school will be talking about her. As I say, it's already happening. Some children are already killing themselves over this, and there will be more. Obviously, this isn't just a problem in schools. What we wanted to get across in Pornocracy is how porn corrupts society and individuals at every possible level, in every culture that has an internet connection, and now obviously with AI too. We are increasingly interacting with the world, learning about it, and even perceiving it through AI. And artificial intelligence is training it, as Jo said, on the most pornified data set in the world, the public internet. And so it becomes a positive feedback loop. And we've already seen so-called grown-up AI tools with supposed safeguards making autonomous decisions to pornify women in professional contexts, like LinkedIn. Very, very subtly say. There was a woman which we detail in the book. She was speaking at an AI conference. She submitted her photo for the website. They needed to resize it. They used an AI tool, just made sure that her shirt was a bit lower so you could see her bra. Little things like that will chip away at the dignity of women. And again, to people in this audience, this sounds shocking. But to the generation growing up in schools now, it's quite normal. It's just how life is. I'm 45. I am very lucky to be part of the last generation that can remember a time without the internet and without the kind of porn that we've seen over the last 20 or 30 years. Everybody younger than me, they don't realise that there is an alternative. That's why I say that there is no hope. Because if there ever was a war on porn, it was won by the porn barons before the rest of us, or most of the rest of us, even knew that there was a war being fought. Meanwhile, and I need to be careful here because there are many people in this room who have fought for ages and fought for the ears of those who could have made a difference and been ignored. So I'm not talking about those people. I'm talking about the people who did know and ought to know and did nothing. Nothing in action, nothing to sound the alarm. They did nothing about the extreme content, about addiction and desensitization, about ruined relationships, or porn-induced erectile dysfunction, or the link between violent porn and rape, or its influence on mass delusions like trans. If we wanted to fight back, where would it start? If we wanted to inoculate children from pornography, or at least prepare them for it, you might think we would start in schools. That would be a good place, wouldn't it? Give me the child at 7. But one of the most shocking things for me when researching this book is that not only are schools failing in this regard, they're actively contributing to normalising pornography. In fact, the school curriculum, depending on the school, is infested with pro-porn messages. Now, that's not a matter of Department for Education policy. It's because of the absence of such a policy. And this enables pro-porn, pro-prostitution activists to infiltrate schools via the huge universe of online learning resources. One of the biggest and the most respected, any educator will know, is TESS. It used to be the Times educational supplement, blue ribbon beyond reproach. It was hosting content, lesson plans for 11-year-olds, describing in detail anal sex, pornography, and sexting. Other learning resources, Jo's covered this a bit. She says that other learning resources tell children why they should support the porn industry by always making sure you pay for porn. They say porn isn't bad for you, or not all porn is bad, or we don't know if porn is bad. Porn is a treat, and you should enjoy it in moderation, like a nice slice of cake. This is coming into the classroom in exactly the same way as gender identity ideology. It's not coming, as I said, as a matter of policy. It's because teachers are really busy, and they are looking for something that has a seal of approval on it. Something, and they say, "Oh, that's got the Stonewall banner on it. That's safe. Everything in it. I don't have to think. All my work is done for me." And that's not blaming teachers. We would all do that. We all look for workarounds and heuristics. Nevertheless, that is how porn gets through. And it's not just the classroom either. You have Childline telling under 18s that porn is fun to watch and sexy to enjoy. Well, my message to Childline is that porn is the most powerful tool in paedophiles' grooming locker. How many kids, having been exposed to porn by their abusers, are then going to call up Childline to tell them that they've been groomed and raped? What's so mind-bogglingly awful for me is how sheepishly we all filed into the abattoir of porn. Pornography won, even though there's not a single redeeming thing about it. The question is, how did the pornocracy win? My answer, and I think Jo shares this view, is that we lost the ability to be ashamed. People peddling sex positivity and queer theory-inspired ideas made us fearful to criticise pornography and prostitution at the risk of being publicly shamed as bigots and prudes. But I think people who use porn should be ashamed. And I think we should not be ashamed to shame them. I think shame is a crucial part of who we are as humans, and it's a crucial part of how we evolve, because it alerts us to the things that hurt us and those close to us. In fact, I would say, if you're looking for hope, shame is the one weapon we do have. And queer theorists and porn addicts and rape game aficionados, their attempts to stamp out shame suggests that's the one thing they're actually frightened of. So if you are looking for hope, if you're looking for something we can do, I suggest it starts with shame. We must all work to create the conditions where healthy shame for things you're supposed to be ashamed of, where that can flourish. And I suggest we do this by calling pornography what it is. For me, porn covers all sins. It covers the naked ladies from Razzle in the 1990s to pictures of child rape now. I think we need to get very clear on our language. We need to talk about the names of these videos, even when it's very uncomfortable. We need to call it what it is, violence, rape, and abuse. And we need to talk about why it's bad. We need to talk in the language that appeals more, that reaches those who use this stuff and who see their relationships deteriorating and crumbling, much as they see their erections fail when they're in the company of the person they love, and they can only get erections when they're watching increasingly dark porn. We've got to reach those men, and if we don't, we fail them and we fail the women that they will go on to abuse psychologically or otherwise. I do want us to fight. I do want us to have hope. I just don't want us to expect to win, not in our lifetimes, but we fight for ourselves. We fight for our families and those close to us. And we fight, above all, to keep the folk memory alive that a world once existed before extreme porn was freely available in unlimited quantities, accessible from the privacy and anonymity of its users' bedrooms. And we fight to remember that the meaning of life is to fall in love, and that sex is above all an expression of love. Thank you.
I find that actually people, the kids, like really, really want us to talk about this. Like they're craving it because, as you say, like no one says this isn't normal. And I had all these girls, like 17-year-old girls, like come up to me after the talk and be like, "Thank you for saying this. We've never heard anybody say this." And I think part of it is like you say, it's not policy. It's teachers being exhausted. But do you think that there is also an element of policy? I mean, we know that powerful industries buy culture, they buy laws, they buy politicians. Why would the porn industry not be operating in the same way? You know, like really trying to shut down dissent, to normalise things. Like, do you not think that there's like porn lobbies working at that level?
My gut would be that it's probably a reflection of almost sort of unchecked biases more than it is of people specifically being paid off or some sort of, cabal of bastards. But at the same time, I think, yes, sometimes you do have very few degrees of separation between. For example, when you look at the funding that goes through the Netherlands, that's opaque and dodgy as hell. I know that there are various NGOs, and if you look at the World Health Organization's stuff on sex education as well, it is jaw-droppingly terrifying and very sort of pro-queer theory and pro-porn. So yeah, I do think there are vested interests, but really, I mean, the education bit, that was more of your...
Yes. I would say there's got to be a degree, or an especially high degree, of plausible deniability when it's porn. I mean, I've done a bit of lobbying myself for very boring things, and it's usually kept behind the scenes as much as you can. When it's something like porn, which is effectively, trying to introduce cigarettes in schools, you want to have many sort of cut-offs between you and the actual end product. I have absolutely no doubt that the porn industry is spending a phenomenal amount on PR and public affairs, and I think that is being funneled through lots of grassroots things. There's a lot of stuff that didn't make it into the book, but is in Miriam Cates's report, which is very, very, very good, talking about the links between the people and the messages that appear in these lesson plans and other resources from third-party organisations, and you click through and through from the LinkedIn, and you find that they're a sex worker and that they speak on behalf of the porn lobby and that they've got an OnlyFans and they have their own range of dildos, and guess what? They make a lot of money on porn hub and stuff. And if you follow it back, then yes, you're entirely right. I would also say that there is some hope. Joe and I have some differences when it comes to how we sort of solve this. Joe is, I would say broadly, she's more towards the regulatory side, and I'm more towards the cultural side, but that doesn't mean we disagree on this. I think there is some hope, actually, on the regulatory side. Now, you can correct me, I'm sure, but I think the RSHE curriculum only became statutory in 2020. Is that correct?
I actually don't know.
I think it was around then. And as with all sort of government department for education things, it comes in a way that's it's a bit panicky, and it's a bit, as you know, teachers are very, very, very busy, head teachers and heads of departments too. And I know that after 18 months, I think a huge majority of secondary school teachers were saying, look, I know it's statutory now, but I'm not getting any guidelines about what to teach. I don't even know what the actual messages are, not just about porn, but about, STDs and others. So I think it's going to take some time. And I think now is the perfect time to start talking to your MP and talking to those with the power to influence policy, because I think we are at the tipping moment where people are beginning to realise that actually porn ain't so great, and I don't think we're ever going to get legislation that is more pro-porn than it is now. It's just a matter of stamping out on those who exploit the cracks that you mentioned.
Are there any politicians, apart from Miriam Cates, who are standing up on this issue?
Yes, there are. So Jessel, she's been particularly good. So she suggested that actually on both sides of the screen, so when the Online Safety Act was sort of being brought in, and there were sort of debates around there were debates around online sort of age verification. She said actually, before anything goes online at all, it should have to meet the same requirements as the British Board of Film Classification has for other content. So she's been really good. There are quite a few peers who are very good. Obviously, Baroness Burton did a fabulous report. And there again, she couched it in terms of, well, you know, I don't want to be seen as a prude, but porn's really bad, but I don't want to be seen as a prude. Anyway, you know when you're asking, your mind goes blank. But yes, there are quite a few decent MPs doing their bit.
Performing in porn and childhood abuse, you know, which is obviously very, very high and present. This is clearly somebody who's intensely damaged and is enacting something absolutely sort of grotesque in public, and what it says about our, you know, I don't know what the solution is, what it says about us as a society that is kind of possible, really is, you know, is profoundly depressing, and I don't really know kind of what to do about it.
For those who don't know, it's very common for victims of abuse to recreate or seek to recreate these circumstances through which they were abused. So there's a study in Sweden of porn performers that found 88% had been abused in childhood, and then obviously they went on to be abused on set. What concerns me in particular is now, I think, so with both Bonnie Blue and Lily Phillips, both of them say that they weren't abused. Obviously there's no way of knowing either way, but they both did see pornography at a young age. And anecdotally, I have heard from a few women who have been on OnlyFans who haven't been victims of standard, you know, traditional child abuse, if you like, for want of a much better phrase, but who did watch porn at a young age. So I do think there's something about the trauma of seeing something sort of horrific at a young age, that then means they will go on to enact it on porn sites. So yeah, I do think there's like a new cycle that's emerging that's entirely digital.
One of the things that we've really got to watch for, and really worries me, is the subtleties of this. And you think, you know, what sort of subtlety is there in porn? And I think what we're seeing now is a blurring in so many ways. One of them is between real life and fantasy, which I think pornography has always done, but I think that is put on steroids by the digital worlds in which we live. If you look at some of the people defending porn, especially defending sort of anime porn, it seems that their brains have been clouded and they are living more. They live not just more of their life online, but their sexuality is more directed towards things which really don't even pretend to be real. I think there's a lot of blurring when it comes to abuse too. I think performers in porn, the 88% who've been abused, I don't know how many of them would actually consciously realising that what they are doing is acting out their abuse too. But what worries me again when it comes to children is they might be doing stuff that they don't even know is even sexual or is even abuse. For this book, we both had a deal that we weren't going to watch pornography in order to write about it without very, very good reason, and we were going to tell the other, you know, I want to watch a clip of this to see this, and, you know, tried not to sort of watch too much. One of the things that I watched some Roblox porn, which is easy to sort of laugh about. Oh, Lego figures rubbing up against each other, but that's in fact the most dangerous of all, because what it's about is it's teaching children that they can't have physical boundaries from each other. It's quite funny to see pixels sort of interact, but it's not funny because you live in this space. We can't think like children who actually, they're not looking at the screen, they are in it. They are living it right there. And if somebody comes up and invades their space, and it's immersive, and you're seeing it, and you're hearing in your ear stuff like, you love it, you fucking bitch, how does that change you? What does that do to you? And what will you then go on to do to others? Because it's not that bad. It's just normal. It's just what happens in these spaces. So it's those subtleties and those blurrings that I think we really need to watch out for and talk about more.
So I think what you were saying about shame was so powerful earlier. And as a woman who has had many boyfriends in the past who I've had to talk about these things with, because I don't want to speak with someone who isn't on the journey of, you know, giving up porn, it's been really hard to balance that kind of line of, I'm literally horrified by what you've done, but I also want to see your humanity enough to believe that you can be different.
Yeah.
So I don't know what the answer is of how you navigate that. I'd also open to the floor for any particularly men who have any experiences of, how do you make shame productive rather than just, because I think a lot of porn use is also driven by shame. Like I had a partner who relapsed, and he was like, it's just completely driven by shame of like just becoming that terrible person again. How do you make shame productive?
Okay, you said the word relapsed. That's the most important word, because you recognise that men who use porn and it's compulsive and they can't stop doing it, even though they don't want to, and even though they can see or feel that it's causing some damage in their life. What does that sound like?
Addiction.
It sounds like an addiction, because it is. And there's a conference just down the road where you might get shouted down for saying that, and I can understand the reasons why. It doesn't make it any less true. Porn is addictive. That does not absolve people whatsoever who use it and who are addicted. If anything, it makes it worse. If you can't recognise the addiction, if you can't recognise people who love you, telling you, this is hurting me, please stop, please get help. That doesn't make you less responsible for your actions, it makes you more. To sort of somehow find a way to avoid using the P word and to start having a bank of the most popular categories. Did you know that the Adult Video News Awards, the Oscars of the industry, it celebrates incest, it gives out awards for incest, and there's lots of other stuff like that. That's why we had to pack the book full of really horrible stuff, because we can't gloss over this.
Thanks for writing the book. You mentioned at the beginning of your talk that the two of you had a difference when it came to you were more cultural change, education, Joe, you were more regulation.
Yes.
We certainly want to see this whole industry regulated out of existence, but we do the cultural work as well. Collective Shout for a World Free of Sexploitation. We do them together. Is there any reason you could explain why you would see them as distinctive or different? Because I don't know if you have one without the other. Like we have more success with regulation now because we've done the cultural work while also calling for the regulatory levers and the legislation and laws to rein this industry in.
So far as I understand from your point of view, Rob, I know that you're concerned that any regulation that would absolutely outlaw pornography would be ineffective because the way the online world works is if there's damage to any connection, it'll find a route around it. So it'll be ineffective and potentially quite draconian because where to draw the line, how do you enforce it without essentially sort of falling into some sort of police state. I think part of the reason why we differ in approach is that from having sort of a background in feminist activism, I've seen things like the Nordic model, and I do think that legislation can make a huge difference. And I also am well aware of women who are older than me who have been fighting things for a lot longer that seemed insurmountable, and then I sort of think back to things like essentially women's history has been comprised of these sorts of struggles. So I'm not as hopeless as Rob because I kind of have never had any hope. But I realise it's just part of it's patriarchy rebooted. It's still patriarchy, and I guess that's something we're always going to be kicking against. When it comes to, for example, the Online Safety Act, I'm doing a thing next weekend, and it's really interesting that a lot of the allies I found myself with on the trans stuff who are libertarian into freedom of speech are suddenly very concerned that their access to pornography might be restricted because they're now asked to prove their age when they click onto porn sites. And I mean, that's the other thing. Everyone's sort of talking about how there's going to be some terrible effects of the Online Safety Act, but we haven't actually seen them. So I do think there is room for well thought out legislation. It annoyed me that it didn't just target pornography. It annoys me that it targeted harmful online content. I think it should have been more focused. But frankly, I would kind of gnaw off my own limbs to stop porn at this point. I do not care.
I might have made a bit too much about there being differences between Joe and me. It's not like we are at daggers drawn saying, oh, it's school culture. You go, oh, no, it's all regulation. I think, like you, I think the two go hand in hand. I just tend towards more culture because I'm a man, and this is my responsibility, and it is ours. And I think it is up to every man who uses porn to stop. It's up to every man who has stopped to convince others to. That's what we can realistically do in our lives. I would like to see pornography banned, not because it's fashionable, but because it's because politicians understand what they are doing, because they are fully briefed on this, and they are being pressured by their constituents, because there is a big wider constituency out there who are speaking up about one's harms. That's simply the part of it that I'm more interested in doing. And yes, I mean that. Yeah, I might have slightly overstressed if I gave across any sort of disparagement about regulations. I think one of the wars that we have to fight. I was following in the darker reaches of the internet the conversation about collective shout. I don't know if you were in the same dark depths of the internet that I was, and I was on a message board where they were all talking about how evil and all, they were. And there was one person who was the voice of reason. There's always one man who's slightly smarter than all the rest. And I remember he said, look guys, have your fun. Have your fun with the abuse and the threats and making porn of them. And but we've got to be strategic here. One of the weapons that they use, not just collective shout, but but in other parts of the world, is they target the ancillary service providers, the payment rails, Visa, and all that. And they've been very, very successful there. But remember, these companies are businesses. They're capitalists. And if there's 1 million anti-porn people sign a petition, and we sign 1,000,001 saying, actually, we like rape games, in fact, we want more of them, they will go with us. Because, and I think that is something we have to bear in mind too. And that's why I think the culture is so important, because we are at war with those people, and we are at war with their minds, and we're at war with those who once they drift towards that, we can't get them back. The only people who can get you back from an addiction is that person. So that's why the culture is so important to me.
Interestingly though, even though that many people signed a petition against our achievement, and this is collective shout right here, we got rid of hundreds of rape, incest and sexual torture games off Steam and itch.io because we targeted the credit card companies and the payment gateways. And interestingly, I can't remember what the final signature was in that other petition against us, but what was fascinating in this case is it didn't work because the win was way bigger than we ever imagined. And now more platforms have implemented the updated terms of service that the credit card companies put into place on Itch and Steam that actually gone across multiple other platforms, like a whole, for example, Manga Porn's website that came down because they couldn't comply, with the terms and conditions. So in that case, all those phone calls and millions of signatures made no difference, which was, great for us, apart from the rape and the death threats and the dirty report, the cost effective. But yeah, I was just curious because we certainly do both in parallel. In Australia, we know we can't just get it all outlawed, but it's an incremental approach. So in Australia, we were successful in spearheading a campaign for age assurance, age verification, and we've just conducted successfully, the Australian government, pressured by ourselves, piloted a trial of age verification technologies and found that that the technology was available and privacy preserving. This is a global findings, like first study of its kind in the world. I recommend if you want to have a look at it. Age check scheme, age assurance technology trial. And we've also been successful in getting social media age of access to 16, which goes into effect in December.
Oh, congratulations.
It's brilliant.
So you know how sometimes some things are so pervasive, it's really hard to target it at the root cause. So something like pornography is hard to define what it is when it comes to dealing with regulations or legal bodies as to what we think is pornography. So for example, you don't even need to go to porn websites anymore. You type in stuff on Instagram and TikTok and YouTube, you have something pretty graphic in itself. And I was wondering, in your experience of, in the process of writing this book, as well as Joe, your years of advocacy against pornography, I wonder if you've thought about a strategic way of thinking about what is the one thing, or like this one domain, or this one area. Because with prostitution, if you recall, whenever we try to come up with regulations, they often come up with this really stupid excuse. Like, oh, we can't regulate it because it would just go underground and there would be no way to regulate that or save the women, as if they really care about the women. But like that, because it's so pervasive and it's everywhere, what is porn and where should the regulation begin?
Well, I mean, that sort of cuts to the heart of why we called the book Pornocracy, because it is essentially now a system of being. It is a system of control, and it's so diffuse. It's so in everything. It's from each of our pockets to our minds to our it is inescapable. So pinpointing, I think one of the incredibly effective campaigns was obviously Layla Micklethwaite when she targeted payment systems on Pornhub, but obviously that's one site, and yes, just as with prostitution, there were lots of sort of fevered speculation and complaints that it would encourage people to go to even darker sites, more darker than the ones that were hosting images of rape and abuse, but whatever. So yeah, I think that is probably where I agree with Rob, in that I think taking responsibility and encouraging people to feel a sense of shame and to sort of take it back to the individual has some purchase. But I do think that does have to be combined with something. And I think actually probably one of the first things we need to do, just to get bloody politicians to take it seriously. A COVID-style response to what is clearly a pandemic that is sweeping across the world, or has swept across the world, I mean, it is that much of a problem. We need UN councils on it. We need serious international collective action. That's not going to happen. So I think in lieu of that happening, I can see the point in you suggesting that people perhaps need to start with themselves.
Because we had politicians who were watching pornography while their assembly was in process.
Yeah, we've had the same. Yeah.
Somebody caught them from behind. They were actually watching.
We have Mr. We have Mr. Trash Porn in the UK, so
yeah. So I don't know if this is directly related to Navi's question, but one of the things we came across was Pornhub. In order for a video that may or probably contains rape or child rape, it has to be flagged by users 15 times before it goes on the list to be checked, before it goes on the waiting list. The person who works his or her way through the waiting list is one person who works 7 hours a day, 5 days a week. I don't know the amount of content loaded up to Pornhub, but it's something in the order of days per minute. So the idea, I think it's an important question to ask. What is porn? I think it was Manet's. Was it Manet who did Olympia, and that was porn in its day. But I think when you are watching videos, the titles of which we've mentioned, I think everyone sort of agrees that that's what we're talking about when we're talking about now. It doesn't particularly concern me about what is the difference between an erotic novel. I would like us to focus on the huge long tail of things that nobody can really stand up and defend. Last thing I'll say on this. Sorry,
No.
Yeah, sure. The last thing I say, at Philia, I noticed some of the protesters are handing around leaflets, and the bottom paragraph is again aimed at collective showers. That this bigoted group who want to restrict artistic freedom, I think was this word. Make them say rape games.
Yeah.
Make them say
Absolutely.
a game where you play a male character
Yeah.
who's angry that your mother cheated on your father, so you have to rape her. So you have to rape your sister. Say it. It's a horrible thing. And it's a horrible thing to say at the top of your voice, but fucking do it.
Yeah.
We all have to do it. Sorry for shouting.
Well said.